Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Scenes. My name is Andres Cuervo, and in this space I have the opportunity to have conversations with friends, people that are creatives in the film industry and other areas of the creative space, and we just talk about life, about different things beyond what we do and beyond what we work on. And today I have the pleasure of having David Hamilton, a good friend.
All right.
Welcome to the pod.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, bro. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm very excited about this one because we not only work together in different projects, but we also share a lot of things together in our core beliefs and the things that we're excited for. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Pleasure.
Awesome. To start with, David, why don't you share with me a little bit of your background story? We earlier we were talking about, your family and growing up, and I think it kind of gives context to some of the topics that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I am from the great city of Buffalo, New York, up north, man. So I grew up with me and three of my siblings. So I've got an older sister, older brother, and I got a baby sister.
You're kind of in the middle.
Yeah. So I'm like the middle baby. I don't even know what to call it, right? And so grew up with my mother, my father, all of us together. I do have two sisters that are much older. So it's funny, I tell people this. So like my oldest sister is like a few years younger than my mother. Because my pops was old. It's like my pops was like 20 something years older than my mom.
Oh, wow.
So I have two sisters. I don't like calling them half sisters, but I got two sisters that are much older, but four of us grew up together in Buffalo. Yeah, man. So my mom was a teacher. My dad did all sorts of different kind of odd jobs, right? That had an interesting relationship with my dad that kind of has shaped a lot of what I believe about manhood and fatherhood. That I'm sure we'll talk about some. Now we live in Atlanta now. I've been married for 18 years. My beautiful wife. We got two little girls, 10 and 8. We're homeschooling them. We do. So I'm a cinematographer, DP. By trade currently. It's been a long winding road to get to that, but my education is in teaching, so I taught for 2 years up in Buffalo before we moved down here. After being married for about a year, we moved down to Atlanta. My wife got her master's at a school down here, so
okay, cool.
She has a master's in counseling.
Right?
Yeah, so she has a master's in counseling.
So she has a lot of practice with you.
Absolutely, bro. So she's got a master's in counseling. That's not what it's called, and she's gonna be mad at me. But and then she has a master's in marriage and family therapy.
Okay.
And then she has a specialization in Christian sex therapy.
Wow.
So we moved to Atlanta for her to do school. The plan was to move back up to Buffalo after that. We got plugged into our church down here through school, and we wound up staying, man. There's been a couple times where we thought we were gonna move back, didn't. It took us a while to have kids, so it's part of our story is we wrestled with infertility for like the first 7 years of our marriage. So we're at a point where we didn't think we were gonna have kids. Then we had our first, about 7-8 years into it, and so kids grew up, starting to grow up. They're plugged in. All they know is Georgia, right? So we've been here, so Georgia's home, right now. But yeah,
I went to Buffalo on my way to the Niagara Falls one time, and man, it was cold.
When did you go?
It was 1992.
Okay.
Or 94, somewhere around that year.
Yeah.
And it was my first time coming to the States. We drove from Miami all the way to the Niagara Falls. Coast to coast, and man, it was wonderful, but it was challenging. And I still treasure a lot of those memories from going to Buffalo. I remember one time I was playing outside, first time seeing the snow, and talk about the amount of snow. And I remember digging a hole to be able to, because it's mostly the cold. It's not just the cold; it's the wind factor. It's like chilly. It's like your nose.
Lake, man.
And when we got to Niagara Falls, they were frozen, of course. So it's like these pieces of ice, and I had picture like, the falls and the water is gonna come out. It's just like pieces of ice just going out.
That's so funny, man. So we took my girls got to go to Niagara Falls for the first time this past Christmas. So we did this crazy road trip where my wife is from Jersey, so we went to Jersey. We drove to Jersey, then we drove to Buffalo, then we drove back to Jersey before coming back here. but they got to see the falls. So we went to Niagara Falls for New Year's Eve. They do like fireworks and stuff over the falls.
Cool.
But it was freezing.
Yeah.
There was no snow, man, the whole time we were up there. That was
Really?
like one of the big things. They wanted to see the snow. And we were up there. It was cold. But it never
But it was snow.
It never snowed, man. But they got to see the falls, and they were like not impressed at all because it was so cold.
Yeah.
They was like, can we just get back in the car? I was like, no, you're going to behold the beauty and wonder and majesty of Niagara Falls. And they're like,
Yeah. Last year I went to Brazil and I saw the Iguazu Falls.
okay.
And that was a spectacular,
Yeah.
just amazing,
Yeah.
from the Brazil side and also from the Argentinian side. It's just like two different things. It's
Yeah.
just one
It's-
fight. I think that's one of those, along with the Galapagos Islands, those are two spots that, anybody that has a chance, I would advise them to go. Definitely.
Yeah.
How was your college experience going for education and teaching, and what kind of motivated that side of you? Because that's something that we share together. I also taught at University of Miami and Connecticut School of Broadcasting, and I feel like that's one of my callings, to be, a mentor and a teacher somehow. I have experienced that formally and informally in many ways, but I think teaching kind of becomes more a passion than just a career. I don't know if it's the same in your.
So sort of, yeah. So I went to Niagara University. So my college campus was literally right on the border of Niagara Falls, New York, and Ontario. But like you could look out my dorm window into Canada. It was a little bit downriver from the falls.
So you go out the window, it smells like maple syrup.
Not quite. Just smelled. But so we went to school in Niagara Falls for education. So I used to run cross country and track in high school. And so as I was kind of coming into any sort of like self-identity and self-awareness in high school, that's kind of like what I latched onto is running. So back then, took it pretty serious. I was never like really that good, but I was serious about it. And so I got a scholarship to Niagara University. And that was one of the few schools that I applied to that actually was going to offer a scholarship. So I wound up going there. I chose education. My mom's a teacher. So was always in school with her, right? Went to the schools that she taught at when I was younger. And also did a lot of, was starting to do some like spoken word poetry and stuff kind of in that season of my life. And so, but I chose education. I was going to be a math teacher when I started, right?
Oh,
so
really? Not even languages?
No. So actually, I'll kind of like fast forward and then come back. So I started as a math education teacher. I got into like my second math class. And
Man, it's crazy. I know.
And it was, I think it was just because.
Quadratic equations, U-turn.
Yeah. So it's funny, man. So math was super, I think I chose math because it was super easy for me through high school.
Wow.
When I got to college, I realized that it wasn't because I was like amazing at math. I think it was my school just wasn't.
Oh man, what a bummer.
So I remember being in, I don't know, probably calculus or something like that. And they started doing factoring in some sort of way that I just never heard of before. Right. And I mean, I went through high school with like straight A's in math. And then I got in college and they were doing math like it was, basic arithmetic. And I'd never heard of it. I was like, I think they didn't prepare me for this. And so I wound up switching my major to English because around that time, I started doing spoken word poetry. And I was like, hey, I can do this, instead. But I think whether it was going to be math education or English education, I wanted to be in the schools because I wanted to be kind of part of change in a way that I think was more of a grassroots thing, right? Like I highly esteem teachers, I highly esteem educators, especially those that are working with younger kids, because I think that that's a pivotal moment in all of our lives where our identities, our beliefs about ourselves are being shaped. And so I wanted to be a part of community building from that more sort of grassroots perspective. And just okay.
So you will say that your mom being a teacher, growing up in that environment, kind of inspired you to do that. Now you were talking about also the kind of like the plays that your relationship with your dad and the many traits and things that he did also influence you later on. You can talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, man. So I say that probably not in the sense that most people say, like my dad taught me this, taught me how to be a man, taught me how to do these things. It was kind of the opposite for me. Like, so my pops was always present. He was always there, but I think he was always trying his hardest. But I think because of his upbringing, his history, the ways that he was there for us wasn't necessarily healthy, right? I think. And as a kid, I didn't understand or appreciate. And so what I mean, like, so my dad was like, probably, if I had to like stereotype him, he was like the embarrassing kind of crazy old man on the block, right?
Really?
Like the kids step in the yard and he's like yelling, get out of my grass, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
That was my pops in a lot of ways. He would do kind of odd jobs around the neighborhood. And my friends would see it, right? And so it'd be a little bit embarrassing because my dad is working at the corner store, in the back for like probably pennies, right?
Yeah.
And so like as a kid, it wasn't something that I would look at like, yo, this is my dad and I'm proud, right?
And at what age, because you say your dad was much older than your mom, but at what age did they have you, for example? Because sometimes it's that generational gap also, it's another factor.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to do some math, right?
But was he much older when they had you?
My mom is 70 now, right? So 40 years ago. So she had me at 30. So my pops would have been pushing 50.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
It's not like, oh, let's go to a park and play together, throw the ball.
Not that. And I think so also, right, and I can appreciate this now as a man trying to lead a family and trying to, right, make my mark on the world, so to speak. He also had a very, call it troubled, upbringing and childhood and life, right? So he's born Pigeon Creek, Alabama, right? Most people, I ask people from Alabama, like, hey, have you heard of Pigeon Creek? Like, no. So that's what Pigeon Creek, Alabama is. If you look on it on Google Maps, it's like a field. So, but he wasn't raised with his parents. I'm going to say that his mother passed when he was like very early on, like if not in childbirth with him, like while he was a baby. And I think his father died before he was born, right?
Wow.
And so he was raised with like his aunts that was abusive, so imagine like black man growing up right in rural Alabama, right? And so he didn't have, I don't think, the tools to be right a good father. And I look back now, and so I process this a lot as a man now, right? I look back on some of the stories that they would tell, but I remember at his funeral or his memorial service, people who knew him, like his old friends or people who knew him in like the 70s before, like right before I was born, would talk about him in these ways that like I'd never experienced, right? So it's like, they call him T-Bone. T-Bone was always smiling. He was so kind and like he was just so fun and like life at a party. And me and my brothers and sisters, we were looking at him like, who is T-Bone? Who is T-Bone? And who is this man that these folks are talking about, right? Because that wasn't the experience that we had with my father. But I think that, the weight and the pressure of life had like a huge impact on him, where by the time we came around, right, and he's trying to provide for us, and he's trying to, without an education, without maybe tons of skills, he's trying to provide for us and make things happen. And I can understand the weight of making difficult decisions that you think is best for your family and they not pan out, right? The mental load and strain that can take on you, right? And so he was always just mean. You know what I mean? Like that's how I'm pretty sure that's how we would all describe like
in processing his own world.
Yeah. And so like the dad that I grew up with, he was always angry. He was always yelling at us, right? And then so as we got older, like as I started getting to high school, again, it's all stuff that I learned after the fact, that he started developing dementia. Him and my mother got separated. They separated, I think, my sophomore year in high school. And so during that time, he's living on his own. My older brother and sister are off to college. So me and my little sister live with my mom. And my dad is, across town. But his health started to decline, in particular, like his mental health. And so he's, I remember these times, man, he would like get on we call it the metro. It's like the MARTA here. So just like the public transportation, he would get on the bus and he would come to see us. But, there are times he'd come and he'd be carrying like a trash bag full of trash. But in that trash bag, he would have like an envelope full of cash. And it was his Social Security, like disability payments that he was getting, because and as a kid, right, so I'm a sophomore in high school and I'm just embarrassed, like, why are you on the bus, like carrying a bag of trash? But looking back on it now, man, he's suffering with dementia, right? He's lost his family. You know what I'm saying? Like, so all this stuff is happening. And I'm just, as a kid, I'm just looking at this like, this is so embarrassing. But as a man now, right, I look back on it and like, I see what was happening, right? I see like his mental decline. I see the decline in his physical health and that sort of thing. And so, but yeah, he would just come, he would get on the bus with that stuff because he was paranoid, because he thought that somebody was trying to like, he was after him. They were trying to steal his money. You know, like he felt that he couldn't put his money in the bank and that sort of thing. And so he would come to try and give us money, right? And so that's what he was doing. He was trying to come make sure we were taken care of and give us money. But me as a kid, you know, I'm looking at this and I'm like, man, this is embarrassing, and I wish that this wasn't the case. So when I say that, like, how he shaped me as a man, right, there's one side of it where there were a lot of things that he just couldn't teach me, you know, about being a man, about being a good husband, about being a good father, that like back then I resented and I was, you know, maybe bitter about or angry about, right? But now as a man, you know, I look back on that relationship, or even lack of relationship that I had with him, and I'm not angry about it. Like, I actually maybe have compassion on them, you know, now that I didn't have before.
Different stage. And something that you said is very key in this part of the conversation is the awareness of being present. And I think as parents, we can identify with that, whether we are in a situation like your dad, or whether we're trying to be good parents, but there's so many distractions right now, technology and whatnot. I found myself sometimes being physically present, but not emotionally or mentally present in what's happening at the moment. And that could be also us, you know, powerful impact in the life of our kids when we are there, but we are not fully there, kind of.
Yeah, and as I think, like, as a father now, that's one of the things that probably the thing that I value most is trying to be present, right? Be there and like active when I'm with my kids, right? So like if I'm in their presence, they know that I'm there and they know that I'm paying attention to them, right? And they know that I want to be there. I mean, it's difficult when there's a lot of stress, right? When like my kids walk into the room, my default reaction, my default may be like, hey, did you do the thing that I told you to do? Yeah. Right. And I know that that's not necessarily the healthiest thing, right? Like I want my default reaction to, they walk in the room and I smile, right? And I want that to be what they remember of me, you know, when like, hey, man, every time I walked into the room, like my father was happy to see me, you know what I'm saying? And I don't want it to be that every time they walked in the room, my father, you know, was, you know, like nitpicking about what I was or wasn't doing, telling me to do this or telling me that or criticizing me. Like I want them to remember that, like, man, I find joy in their presence and I want to be there, you know, and I want to be present with them. And so, but that's something that my father didn't teach me, but I feel like he wanted, right? Like in retrospect, I feel like he wanted to be that, you know what I mean? But like didn't have the skills, the mental, right, health to be able to do that. And so I look at it as like I learned it from him, even if he didn't necessarily like teach me directly, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's a challenge for all of us as parents, even in this, let's call it modern era with so many distractions. Sometimes Lucas, my son, comes to me with a Lego piece that he spent hours, and he's like, I want to show you how I did it. Yeah. And so then I look at my phone and he stops talking. And I realize, oh, he wants my full attention. And then he stops talking again. I'm like, oh, it's so natural for me to get distracted. So I'm personally working on that. And I know this is very minimal compared to, you know, your backstory, but it really makes me think of like the importance of being present as something that we as parents can practice, because it will kind of pass on to the next generation and really give them the value that they expect. You know, it's not only the attention, but also saying like, I value you as well. You know?
And my wife she's much better at like helping my girls navigate their emotions and how they feel than I am. Of course, like she's a therapist. She's an amazing therapist. So she knows the value of emotional intelligence as much as, you know, like intellectual intelligence as well, and how to take assessment of like where you are, right? And the importance of knowing where you are so that your feelings don't control, you know? So like she's always like, hey, feel what you feel. right?
Yeah.
You know, and like be okay with feeling what you feel and be honest with how you feel, right? So that you can assess whether or not you should feel that way, right? And then be able to plan accordingly. Otherwise, if you just feel and you're not aware of it, then, you know, you're off in the corner, right? Like crying instead of like actually trying to figure out how to solve the problem that is in your way or to get the thing that you actually want, man. So, but yeah, that being present is important. And I hope that, you know, our girls know that both of their parents enjoy being with them.
Yeah.
But it's hard, man.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's hard, bro. Like when you know stuff is falling apart,
Yeah.
you know, and like you said, they bring you this masterpiece, right? For them, right, it's like this masterpiece, and like you might see like, hey, why do you have 5 sheets of paper? Where'd you get those 5 sheets of paper from? And why'd you cut them into 30 different pieces? And where are you going to put it after you're finished with this? Because I know it's going to end up on my floor. And so you got all this stuff running through your mind, and they're like, oh, like
so true
thing that I made, you know. So
true.
Just trying to find the beauty in those moments, man.
Yeah. And also now that you mentioned emotional intelligence, makes me think that as artists, as creatives, as filmmakers or storytellers, many times, you know, when we don't have a stable emotional background, we kind of overcompensate by our other parts of our intelligence. You know, it's like, oh, I'm going to go fully into geeking out about gear and learning about the history of art. And like intellectual intelligence becomes like a way of compensating or overcompensating for the lack of emotional intelligence. And I feel like sometimes our art also translates that lack of or those fixtures in the emotional intelligence that we have. I don't know if it's been your case sometimes that you kind of overcompensate with intellectual intelligence when you don't have enough tools or mechanisms to navigate the emotional intelligence.
Yeah, man. For me, I don't think it's as much like I dive into intellectual intelligence. I think I find that escape in labor and work, right? So there's always a problem to solve with a lot of kind of like some of the endeavors that we have, right? So where there's stuff around the house that needs to get fixed or projects around the house that we're working on, right? So a lot of times I can escape into that because I can get very tunnel vision when I'm focused on a particular project that needs to get done. And so in those moments where I don't have the courage to confront what's going on in my heart, right, I can tend to hide behind doing work, right? So
getting busy.
Yeah. And, you know, and that can take the form. Sometimes it might be an artistic expression because I might have a project that's due, and so I can, you know, hide in focusing on that and kind of shut out the rest of the world. And a lot of times, particularly in marriage, I think that, you know, because you've got these two imperfect people trying to live life together and trying to help each other, right, flourish, a lot of times that can create friction and tension because you both have needs and, you know, both may not be getting those needs met. But I think that particularly in that context, right, like when I'm feeling some sort of way about maybe my interaction with my wife, right, and for me, a lot of times that kind of core emotion that I wrestle with is shame. Right.
Okay.
And a lot of times, right. So like if we have an interaction or I fail to meet an expectation that most of the time my wife would say that I placed on myself that she didn't place on me, right? Like I tend to withdraw in that shame.
Yeah.
Right?
Instead of confronting in a healthy way.
Yeah. And so then I'll go to, all right, well, I'll just turn and put a lot of energy into this. And sometimes it might be, right, doing something for her, you know, because I don't know if you read, so my wife is a therapist, so all of the personality
The love
tests,
language,
right? All of those personality tests, right? So I tend to express love through acts of service.
Yeah.
And so I'll, you know, spend more time focusing on, all right, well, let me do this thing she's, you know, expressed a desire to have done around the house, or let me do this thing that I know she needs for her business and her endeavors. And she appreciates those things, right? But that's not what she actually wants.
That's your way of expressing the love language, but that not might be the love languages she desires to experience.
Because for her, what's more valuable and what makes her feel more loved is me actually telling her, hey, I'm feeling a lot of shame right now. And I, wanted this and this didn't happen.
kind of like creating that quality time or words of affirmation.
And so that's something that I'm working on, right? I won't say I learned it because I haven't, but it's something that I'm always working on, because I know that that's what she needs and what she values, even if I don't necessarily need or value the same thing that she needs or values. So,
And how was that transitioning from a career in education or of forming yourself as an educator? And I know that you went through like different stages, different jobs, different things, to then landing into the world of filmmaking and becoming, an operator and editor and then cinematographer, and now working on your own projects and working with agencies, but also independently. Just give me a little bit more context on that.
Yeah, for sure, man. So the first video project that I ever did, I was student teaching up in Buffalo. I was teaching at a private Christian high school, I think it was. And I had this idea to do like a video yearbook with the students, with the seniors. And so now this is 2003. Probably.
Okay. That's before YouTube.
Yeah. So it was going to be a DVD yearbook, right?
Yeah.
And so I had this little point and shoot camera that I probably spent money I didn't have on, right, to get like this point and shoot camera. I had my Sony Vaio computer, like desktop. And so I shot a bunch of things with the students. They would just do like, I can't remember. I think it was just like a video bio, and the DVD would have thumbnails of each kid. And
menus.
Like, yeah. And so you click their picture and then their video bio would play.
Whatever movie maker allowed you, or Pinnacle Studio.
You know what it was, man? It was Sony. Sony has an editor. I can't even think of the name right now. But it was like Sony's, whatever their editor was back then. It was weird too because the tracks weren't laid out like, normal. It was crazy. And it was pirated, right? I had some pirated video software that I was editing on back then. And so I just did that with my kids, and it was fun. And I bit off way more than I could chew, right? And trying to figure out all of the technical difficulties in doing that. And, I got to print 60 DVDs now, and the DVDs need labels, and they need cases, and the cases need labels. And so that was like the first video project. And I don't know what made me do it, but I was like, I had this idea, and we tried it. So that was the first video that I did. And then when we got married, we had some friends just like film our wedding, and I tried to edit it, and so did that. And the reason why I did that was because my older sister had got married like a year or two before us, and I saw her wedding DVD, and I was like, this is not good.
Yeah.
And
I can do better.
Yeah, I was like, I can do this, and so just tried it. And so I think like a lot of people started shooting weddings.
Yeah.
So shot a couple weddings, some friends and some different clients up in Buffalo. And then a couple years after we got married, we moved down to Atlanta. And so I was teaching up in Buffalo. So I taught at a charter school in the city of Buffalo for 2 years, taught middle school English. And then we moved down here. And so we moved to Atlanta. My plan was to teach. Everybody told me that I would get a teaching job, easy. It's like, a young black man in Atlanta, you're going to get a teaching job. And I was like, bro, I couldn't get a call back on my resume. It was weird because I had never not gotten a job before.
Not even the running coach.
Yeah, right. It was just nothing, man. And so when we first moved down here, we were staying with a friend in his 1-bedroom apartment. Me and my wife were sleeping in, like, he gave us his room. So we were like sleeping in his room. It was supposed to be like 5 days, right? It was a lot harder to find an apartment than I thought it was. And we had no life experience, right? We were like essentially fresh out of college. So I didn't know what was required to get an apartment, how much money I needed to get an apartment. And so after like a week and a half of trying to find a job, trying to find an apartment, I was like, I got to get out this dude's house. So I went to a temp agency, and the temp agency placed me at a ministry called In Touch Ministries. And so they basically ship a lot of kind of sermon resources and just like devotional resources, Christian education resources, based off of Dr. Charles Stanley, his teachings, right? And so I got placed as a temp in their warehouse. So I was just packing boxes,
logistics,
putting books in boxes and shipping them to customers. But at that time, In Touch was buying a television network from I think from the North American Mission Board. So they were buying a TV network that was located out in Dallas and Fort Worth. And so they were just hiring production assistants. And one of the guys that I worked in the warehouse with knew that I shot videos. So he was like, hey, man, you should go tell them that you do video work and go apply for this. I'm like, okay. And so I did it. And they hired me as a production assistant. And my first job, it was like 3 or 4 of us. We just rented like 20-foot U-Hauls and drove out to Fort Worth.
Wow.
To pack up like this broadcast
Transport
studio
everything
and
here.
just bring all of this gear and this equipment back to the studio there. So that was like my first, experience with any sort of professional, video. And then from there, they started doing a couple of live shows. And so I got to be, a graphics operator on some of the live shows. So I'm putting up lower thirds and that sort of
Chiron.
Yeah. And so started doing that. And then they had, so I don't know how much you know about In Touch, man, but their broadcast department is impressive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it rivals like any newsroom in the city.
Wow.
It was dope, right? And so they had, all the studio space and like edit suites and the broadcast duplication, all that stuff was just right in the house. And so, one of our main jobs was to duplicate broadcast tapes. So like their broadcast it was just probably 100, different tapes we'd have to duplicate, do a QC check and then mail out to all these different stations. And so I was working in that, but at the same time, they were also starting some new TV show projects. And so while I would be on these shows, there was just one motion graphics guy. So he would be like overwhelmed with some of the work he had to do. So I was like, hey, I can build these lower thirds, and figure out how to start learning After Effects and Photoshop. And just on the job, they would just let me do that. And so I started building some of those graphics. It would trying to help him out and relieve some of the stuff that he had going on. And then after a couple of years of doing that, I actually got promoted to be a graphic designer. So I was a motion designer for them for almost a year, I think. So after doing that for a year, wound up quitting because at the same time we were part of a church plant in Atlanta called Blueprint Church.
Okay.
And so I was doing a lot of volunteering with them in their media department. So I after a while, wound up quitting at In Touch to do an internship at Blueprint Church. And the internship was basically, a full-time job of being the media guy at the church plant. So media guy at a church plant, it was just a lot of work. But it was also a dope time and a dope season because there was a lot of trust that the pastor, his name is Hadi Lewis, man, he gave me a lot of trust to be able to kind of communicate the church's vision and, express some of the sermon series artistically. And so after like a year of interning, I came on staff full time at the church. So I was the creative director at Blueprint for about 4 years, right? Wow. So just started, right? It was, we had
that's like
T3i.
A whole university career.
Yeah, dude. So we, bought a Canon T3i, I think it was. Yeah. And probably like a nifty 50 lens. Yeah. And we just shot a whole bunch of stuff on that, I was actually looking at the YouTube channel, just going down a rabbit hole a couple days ago. I was like, some of this stuff was fun. It was just like fun opportunities to get to do that sort of thing. And so, did that for 4 years, learned a lot, just about storytelling, about filmmaking, fell in love with gear, right? Like I love talking gear. I love, being able to shop for gear, window shop for gear, B&H sometimes as well. And so I kind of fell in love with that and then did that for like 4 years. This is a lot of twists and turns in the story as I'm thinking about it, right? So was at Blueprint for about 4 years. Then we planted a church out of Blueprint called Cornerstone. I'm still in Atlanta, but on the west side of the city. Okay. And so it was right around the corner from my house, right? And so I wound up in all that transition, wound up going to Cornerstone as a member, but, was no longer on staff at Blueprint. And so started freelancing for a couple of years. And then wound up getting a job at a creative agency called Story First. Met Andrew, which, if you know Andrew. And so worked at Story First for a while. After a few years, became a partner at Story First. Wow. So we were doing a lot of work with a lot of like higher end nonprofits, doing some pretty cool projects, getting to travel, internationally, shoot internationally and that sort of thing. Got to work on some documentaries. And so that team was amazing. It was like an amazing season of life just because we had like this small, team that just felt like family, and just like really like scrappy creatives just trying to, punch way above our weight class and some of the stuff that we were making and the projects that we were making. Did that for a while, and then our story first got acquired by a larger agency called Look Listen. We, worked at Look Listen for a few years until, gosh, I guess it's been 2 years now. And then from there, I wound up resigning from Look Listen so that I can spend time homeschooling our girls. And so since then, been homeschooling, been, doing some real estate investing, been freelancing, which obviously is pretty slow for everybody. But when it comes, been freelancing and working on some other kind of creative entrepreneurial endeavors. So it's long and winding.
It's very interesting because like many people come to me and say, hey, how can I become a filmmaker? Do I go to school? Do I not? I'm like, there's so many ways. And I've spoke to different people in this space, and the route to becoming a filmmaker is almost like non-identical to anybody. Like everybody comes to it in a different way. But I feel like there is a common thread, and it's like regardless of what your beginning is, either in science or technology or education, is more of like the end goal is not necessarily being a filmmaker, but also like telling stories with these tools, because you were already building something before that. Before that, becoming a filmmaker, I was a photojournalist as well. But before that, I would write poetry and write articles. It's like, I'm just using another set of tools to tell the stories that I had or to express the vision that I have. So it's interesting to see that at every point in turn, it was just like, you graduate from this, here's another challenge, and keep going,
Yeah. And it's, looking back on it now, like I don't, usually kind of walk through like my story and all these turns, but like looking back on it now, that thread has always been there. This storytelling thread and this, this desire to tell stories. I've always been, I guess, moved by stories as well. Like, I love a good movie, of course, right? Like love a good show now, like episodic shows that have, right, a strong story and strong characters that you fall in love with. Like that sort of thing is something that I always value, right? And I think that storytelling is important to our culture, right, as well. And I think that that's ultimately what's gonna preserve culture from generation to generation. And even personally, man, like I wish that like I had more stories of my family, right? Like I wish that I knew more about my father's story and like what made him the man that he was, right? For good or for bad, that like what influenced the person that he became that I know, right, as my father, because that influences me, right? And so, yeah, man, I wish that I had more stories, and I think that that's important.
I think one of the powers of storytelling is that it can motivate people, it can inspire people, it can make us feel something. But the stronger power for storytelling is when it goes beyond motivating to create an opportunity for somebody to take action on what they feel. I think the ultimate goal is when stories not only motivate us, but also give us a chance to make a choice and make an impact. And we both have worked on stories that motivate people to take action, to influence their culture, to influence their communities, to influence their own lives in a positive way that can also make a positive change. We are in this industry, not just because it's an industry and we make money out of it, but also because we have something to say, and we find that filmmaking is one of the tools that allows us to vocalize that, And I know that you are also involved in like community projects and also using storytelling as a tool to engage with other creatives, with other people that share your faith or share your values. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. To some, I think, and this just kind of speaks to like the seasonality of life, right? Like I definitely am not in that same season as much as I want to be anymore, just because I've got girls that I've committed to, right, trying to educate at home, and wife that I'm trying to like, support her dreams and that sort of thing. But I think that in those seasons when I am engaged in kind of that being engaged in the life of a community and helping a community live out story and see the story unfolding right around you and to be able to capture that, those are some of the more meaningful times, right, in seasons in life. And I'm actually, trying to be more intentional in this season about like, hey man, where can I connect with other creators, right? Where can I connect with other people who share similar values and share similar desires to create, right? So yes, of course, I'm actually looking for more opportunities now, right? Like in this season to do that.
Yeah. But I believe that it's also doing like what you said with intentionality.
Yeah.
I think at one point you mentioned that, being a good neighbor, being a good person in your community is probably the first step.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you don't have to form a nonprofit 501c3
Right.
and have like a organization or be so structured. From your point, from where you are, you can already make a huge impact.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't see it, but it's a huge impact in our community. Now, what will be the next step when you intentionally go beyond being the good neighbor and start kind of bringing people along with you and being that leader that is willing to start a church or start a movement or start a meetup at, opening their house or getting other creatives as well. That's like the next step from being to promoting and creating a platform for others as well.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the desires that I have to do that, and it a lot of times it in this season of life has to intersect with what I've set as priority, right? So a lot of that comes one of the things that I want to do is engage more with the homeschooling community that can be around the city, right? And so as I'm developing curriculum with my girls, right, one of the things I'm thinking about is I'm going to actually teach them video editing and storytelling through that means. And so one of the desires that I have is to be able to create curriculum like that and then open up some sort of either join a cohort, right, like a homeschooling co-op, and offer that sort of class through there, right? I kind of missed my opportunity to do it for this year. So as I'm building this curriculum in this community, I'm trying to, like I said, think of those ways. How can I take this beyond this nucleus that is important to me, right? So my core value in my life is like to see my family flourish and to build a family culture within our home that can be one of the building blocks of a strong community, right? I think that as you kind of boil it down, like the things that make a strong community are going to be the family units within that community and how those family units kind of interact with one another. And so that kind of starts at like this nucleus. This is my family, and I'm trying to teach these kids that I've been entrusted with, right, how to be impactful and meaningful members of a community. And so as we're learning, right, I want to be learning in community and growing in community, right? So as we homeschool, we're not trying to like withdraw our kids from community and like, hey, I don't want to be the only influence over you, but like I want you to be part of a community, learn how to be a good neighbor, learn how to be a good friend, learn how to add value to the community that you're in, right? So as we're building this, and so all in like the very early stages of this, right?
Okay.
Transitions of life, but like that is the desire, even in our homeschooling experience, is to be an integral part of the community, right? So again, like coming from an educated background, like that's always my desire is, man, I want to, like, I love teaching kids. I love the thing that I miss most about being in a classroom is definitely not the teaching aspect of it, right? It's just being around the kids and, seeing their genius grow, right? From season to season. And so it's definitely something that I'm trying to build back to and trying to incorporate within my daughter's, childhood experience and our family culture as we're doing that. So that's expressed a lot through our church right now. So like as we're, engaging with our church, right, our kids are in the different children's ministries and like we're in the marriage small groups and stuff like that at our church, trying to build new relationships because we just moved. It's a new home, right, about a year and a half ago. So in all of that transition, we're, planting roots, I guess, would be in trying to not let the busyness and the stress and the responsibilities of life take away from, right, those opportunities to engage in the community and to bring value, right, to the community. So it's a challenge, but it's
another important aspect, and just talking about this could take a long time, but as a nutshell is that many community development projects and things like that focus on creating opportunities for minorities, whether it be Hispanics or Black minorities. But as we were talking, opportunities are not the only way to impact a community when there's not a strong values that when you get those opportunities, you know how to invest properly in that. Or basically, sometimes we have, especially in this country, and I can say that coming from Latin America, you have tons of opportunities. You'd have tons of options. And sometimes it's just not having the character to be a father, to be a part of society as a family nucleus that makes the difference beyond having or not having the opportunities. I wonder what you see in terms of like working with the community, not only creating opportunities, but what do you think is the core that can really transform?
Yeah, man, I think a lot of churches, organizations kind of maybe miss the mark programmatically, in the sense that we tend to create ministries that, say, like youth ministry, right? When you think of a youth ministry, you probably think of, right, entertaining stuff on a stage that'll fight for kids' attention, right, to make them feel like it's cool to come to youth ministry. And I think that what would be more impactful is ministries and programs that are designed to, like, one, mentor kids, but then two, like, where are these kids' fathers and mentor their fathers as well. I think that again, I think that goes back to the core of what the building blocks of a community, which I think are the family unit, right? And how do you help families flourish better, right? Whether it's, economically or socially, education, right? That all that stuff it starts with our family units, right? And so for me personally right now in this season of my life, right, it's me trying to build my family as my girls are young. I'm kind of going through this critical phase of life. Is like, how am I looking at them and instilling the sorts of values that they're going to need to make a mark on this world and, right, live this sort of life with the sort of value that I think, that their creator has given them and created them to do. And I think that as I'm doing that, right, and man, I'll be honest, right, like the last few years have been difficult, right, where it kind of has taken the focus has been more internal on my family and like my role in my family than I would like it to be, in terms of, right, like intentionally turning to open what I'm trying to teach my girls to a community and, like, give back to that community and be an integral part of that community. And yeah, man, like, I think that's always been a value that I've had. And I think that, like, the challenge over the last couple of years, right, if I'm honest with you, man, has kind of distracted, right, from that, man. And so it's always a challenge of, all right, so as I'm doing some of the things that I'm doing now, right, why am I trying to build these things? What do I hope to get and be able to do, right, as we're building these things? And for me, right, education, community, right, being engaged in some sort of mentorship or like youth development is important.
But as you're sharing with honesty, I think is also, it goes hand in hand, because on the other side of the story, you can be so focused on developing your community, people around you, serving others, helping others, that you neglect your own family. And that happens a lot, especially in these faith-based circles where people say, oh, I grew up in church, whatever, and my parents in front of everybody were this, but at home we lack all of those things, So I think it definitely goes hand in hand. Yeah,
absolutely, man. I think it's the bedrock of culture is the family unit, and I think that it's incredibly important. That's just the season that we're in right now, man. But
another area that is amazing and I will, kind of build to that is in your life, despite your background and all the things and just like going up the ladder little by little until, like, not only, because we work in the film industry, it's not a film hobby, otherwise we wouldn't. But as a film industry, you've been able to go from just working part-time, volunteering, to working as a staff member, to becoming a partner in an agency, now being a freelancer. But you've also have developed other strategies beyond filmmaking to keep on your entrepreneurial spirit, you know, where it be real estate or a best-selling author now that I would love to hear about the book and what you're doing with your girls in that as well. But also creating other avenues, because the film industry goes up and down, and there are recessions in the film industry. And sometimes when we don't open our minds to other things that we can do creatively to generate income, to generate revenue, we could just miss the mark and like close ourselves and be very kind of in despair. But in your case, you have been willing and open enough to risk, and that's, I think, that's a key. Doesn't always work, but you're willing to risk and try something else.
Man, I think the willingness to take risks is a key component in the ability to succeed, especially in America with the vast amount of opportunity, right? Like everything that you do it's going to be a risk, whether it's deciding to stay at a job instead of leaving the job to pursue an entrepreneurial venture. You're still taking a risk by staying in what you think is security, right? Because that security is determined by somebody else, and somebody else is who's leading that organization, their desire to go one direction or another, to keep you or replace you, whatever. It's like life is all of risk. And for me and my wife, we want to build a life that is free, right? Like I don't want to be chained down by financial obligations, right? I don't want to be overwhelmed by the bills that I have due, you know what I mean? By trying to hustle just to pay bills. And I think that one of the traps in our society is, you know, that we kind of get, I mean, it's the rat race, right? You kind of get caught in this cycle of going to work to fund life, you know, and then you got to go to work to pay for this. And it's kind of like, well, am I trying to live, or am I trying to work? Like, which one is right? Am I living to go to work, or am I working to fund a life? And it's very easy to get, you know, caught in this place where I have to go to work, right? It's just to make it. And I think, unfortunately, that's where most of us are for most of our lives, and we miss a lot of beauty, a lot of opportunity, and a lot of time, right, in that pursuit of whatever we're chasing, right? A lot of times we're not even trying to pursue happiness. We're just pursuing survival. We're just, you know, we're just living what this culture has put before us, right? This path that culture has laid out before us. And so,
and in practical terms, how somebody that is in the film industry or not can start creating habits that will help them to have that kind of freedom? Yeah.
So one of the things I think is, and I'm probably more conservative than than most people are when it comes to this, but I think like live below your means. Okay. Right. One, I mean, it's obvious, right?
But but when the new red camera comes and you're like, oh, that's what's going to validate me as a filmmaker, having the newest camera.
Yeah. But I think that like the less you want to hold, the easier it is, right? To when the ups and downs come, especially like you're talking about the film industry, right? That a lot of it is based off of, you know, what the industry is doing, right? If companies don't have a lot of money to spend on new videos, right, then they're not going to spend that, and they're not going to hire you, right? And those opportunities become less and less. But like, there's a difference that if I buy, you know, a, you know, $500,000 house versus a $300,000 house, right? When those difficult times come, right, I might buy that $500,000 house in, you know, just a season of, man, I'm working, you know, around the clock, and like money is just flowing in, right? And then when the seasons change and that drops a lot, right? Now you are caught because you're like, I got all these bills, right, and not enough to cover it because the work, you know, dried up, so to speak. But and it's a house, like the $500 house and the $300 house, right? Mm-hmm. It's just space, right? There's not like a big difference between those things, except for the financial obligation, you know? And so like if you can minimize your financial obligations on the front end, then I think that helps you to weather the ups and downs of, of income as it, decides to come in or not. So, and it's a lot easier to upgrade your lifestyle than it is to intentionally keep your lifestyle right at a certain level. Okay. And that's this trap that I think we all fall into, right? Like I fall into it. It is always a constant struggle to, man, if I upgrade this, I'm now committed to that upgrade, right? Regardless of what happens in terms of my income. But then that limits the choices that you can make, right? So like if I buy a house that's stretching what I can afford while I'm working, this 9-to-5 job, that means that I have to keep working this 9-to-5 job, right? In order to continue to be able to afford this house and this mortgage that I'm paying for. And so like if you can delay the gratification of the upgrade, you know what I'm saying? Again, this is right. Yeah. I'm talking to myself right now. If you can delay the gratification of that upgrade and, hey man, I'm going to live at this level intentionally, right? Not because anybody's forcing me to, so that I have, right, something stored up. Not because I'm scared of the lack, but it's like the security provides me freedom in the sense that, hey, say I have, plenty of money to buy a $500,000 house right now, but I decide on the $300,000 house. Now that difference I have to invest in whatever I want. You know what I'm saying? So that can be my next passion project, right? That can be helping somebody on their passion project, right? That can
be taking a break.
Yeah, or taking a break, resting with my family. Yeah. Those are the sorts of decisions that I think, we're subject to, particularly in an industry like this, where like most of us are going to be freelancers or something like that, where your income it fluctuates and it fluctuates drastically, right? So being prepared for that, to be able to kind of level out that curve, I think is an important skill that many of us right? Yeah. To not just learn, but like have the discipline
to maintain,
to make yourself right in those seasons of
that's awesome. That's gold right there.
Yeah.
And tell me about the book now that we got into not only filmmaker, entrepreneur, real estate investment, and now best-selling author as well. David Hamilton coming out with books.
That's so funny, man. So I wrote a book. It's a children's book. It's called JC and Her Joybird. This is about this creative little girl she's super artistic, right? Super creative. So she loves to paint, draw. She loves hip hop. She loves fashion, and she likes to make all these creative different outfits, right? But it's the type of creative that also gets her in trouble because she's going to use whatever she can find around her house to make her art, right? And so as like she's growing up, so she's a third grader, and like she's growing up, her family's starting to change. She's got like a new baby sister. Her older brother's going off to college, and she's starting to feel a lot of things that she hasn't felt before, like loneliness and sadness and, frustration and, anger and all these sorts of things. And she doesn't know what to do with all those emotions, right? And so the story is about her learning how to live life with all of her emotions. But along kind of her story, one day she finds this injured blue jay in her front yard and decides to take care of it. And just like through taking care of this little bird, she becomes friends with this little bird. She learns that that there's magic in feeling what she feels, right? And that she can hold joy and sadness in the same moment together. So the story is really just like trying to show kids emotional range, right? And emotional intelligence, and being able to embrace the fact that it's okay to feel certain things, and, to be able to see, one of, I hope, many examples that kids can pick up a book and read and see, a kid like them feel things that they may not, be able to express or put words to, and see how, that they can deal with it. So I think it's a fun story. There's lots of humor and, some rap lyrics and all that sort of stuff that cool. My girls they just
That's an awesome story because it involves creativity, but also what we talk about, emotional intelligence. It's almost like a mixture of your wife's potential and your potential. I understand that even your girls participate. I have a copy of the book right here, and JC and Joybird, right?
Yep, JC and their Joybird.
Okay, that's cool.
Sir.
So what was the involvement of your girls in
Yeah, so my baby girl, she did I did all the cover design, but she did the illustration on the front page there.
that's
And so
the drawing and the
Yeah.
Blue Jay right here? That's so cool.
yeah, so one of the cool things I think is a cool thing about the book. So I call it a Pictures by Me book.
Oh, cool.
And the concept is that the reader, the kids, get to be the author, or not the author, but they get to be the illustrator of the book.
Love it.
And so throughout the book, there's spaces in the book where the
You
kids,
can draw your own.
the kids draw
So
what's
creative.
going on.
It's almost like an interactive book.
Yeah. And so when I thought about it, I was thinking for me as a kid, we had color, paint by number or color by number, or choose your own adventure books, right? So I wanted this to feel kind of like this idea of a Pictures by Me, where kids can read a story that they love and then they can bring the story about to life by drawing their own pictures. And it just
Awesome.
engages a lot of their higher thinking, because they've got to understand what's going on and see some of the details to be able to, communicate it. So
That's great because it's not only a book for children, but something that, parents can use as an educational tool as well.
Yep.
And a way to, incentivize creativity on the kids.
Yeah,
That's pretty awesome.
yeah.
So where can we find the book? I know that it's sold out on Amazon, but
No, so it's on Amazon. You can find it on Amazon. If you just search JC and her Joybird, you can find it there. I'm also kind of starting a boutique, or have started a boutique publishing company called Phoenix Lynn Story Studio.
so this is just the first one of many.
This is going to be the first one of many. So
Awesome.
my dream with Phoenix Lynn, and you can go to phoenixlynn.com to buy the book, and I'm going to have different sorts of things on there as well. But my dream with the company is to build a platform. I want to write more stories, tell more stories, but also want my girls to be able to publish their own stories as well. So I'm just using it as a learning opportunity for them as well, right? Trying to build a family business that they can see this entrepreneurial task or project and be involved in and watch it grow. So I've had them, fulfilling orders, right? We've been on, they've been doing data entry and packing orders and shit.
Yeah, your girls told me, I'm going to get royalties. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to get them.
Yeah, man. So my oldest, her name is Sola. She's like one. She's just like a numbers whiz, man. She loves math. She always has, and she loves numbers. But she's always looking over my shoulder, she's like adding totals up for the day over my shoulder. I'm like, hey man, chill, right? So yeah, it's fun, man. It's been a fun process watching them, and my youngest daughter, Ori. So kids are amazing, right? How different they can be.
Yeah.
They're both creative. They're both incredibly intelligent and incredibly intellectual. But Ori, she expresses herself more through art.
Yeah.
And she enjoys and expresses herself more through art. Whereas Sola's she's very analytical, she's very logical, which is like me. And my wife is the feeler, so Ori is very much that side of her personality. But it's so fun to watch them balance each other out and interact and make each other stronger in those areas. But yeah, man, Phoenix Lynn Story Studio, trying to just build a fun little experience and project for my girls where we can build the business and watch it grow, and they can learn all of the tangible and intangible skills. And
That's really cool because it's almost like everything that we talked about expressed in a tangible way, like how you can impact community, start by being a good person, but also create something that reflects who you are and that it's going to help the next generation to have what they didn't have.
Absolutely, man.
For those who didn't have a parent, we can become a model of a parent, as well. And I think I've always wanted to produce content, including books, and I have ideas for kids. And, this really encouraged me one more time to do it. One time I created a calendar for kids with the pictures of my son laying down on the bed.
Yeah.
And little did I know that years later, I would still have relationships and friends that came just by people who bought the calendar and whatnot. So that's pretty fun to see. And really, I think it's an encouragement for all creatives to look for ways that not only they can create revenue, but that they can also contribute to their culture and their society in a meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's so important. I think and this has been a big thing over the last couple of years, especially like in Black culture in particular, is just like that idea of representation and seeing yourself on screen and seeing yourself in the stories that you read and that sort of thing. And so I just wanted this to be, right, like what hopefully will become the norm of, right, little Black girls seeing themselves in stories. And this one is, it's, you know, it's not like super fantasy, it's very relatable, right? She's a normal little girl who has normal little girl feelings, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of the cultural references in the book are just normal cultural references, but done in a way that like makes you feel like it's normal and it's good, right? And it's a good thing, and that like my culture is good, and right, the way that I live my life, the way that my family laughs together, and the way that I get in trouble, right? Like it's all like there's beauty in all of that, and I just wanted, you know, this to be my contribution to the hopefully growing pool of representation that our kids get to see in the media, in the art that they consume. So
that's awesome. And the book also has an Instagram account, right?
Yeah. So you can if you go on Instagram, Phoenix Lynn. So at Phoenix Lynn, or you can follow me, is written by David Isaiah on there as well. We do a lot of posts about the book. As people are starting to get their books, right, getting to see
the drawings and stuff. Yeah. That's
so
cool.
It's really cool. It's really like a blessing and a humbling experience to see something that you made in the hands of people that you don't know.
Exactly,
right?
And how they respond to it.
Yeah.
I think that part of making it interactive is setting it apart, and it's going to create a cool feedback.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Definitely.
Well, I'm beyond excited to have you here, David. I don't know if there's anything that you want to add for the audience to have kind of like a takeaway from our conversation.
Man, I think takeaway is, right, like try to live life full, you know, that idea of being okay with like feeling what you feel and being connected to your life as you live it, right? Like don't be afraid to see what your life actually is, and if it's not what you want it to be, right, to do something drastic to make it what you want it to be, because it's your life and you're the architect of it. You get to shape it, right? And I think that, I believe that we were made by a God who is a creator, right? And so we were made to make something beautiful. And so, anybody that I come across with, I encourage you, like, man, make something beautiful with your life. And it's something that I try and instill in my girls all the time is you were put here and you were made to make something beautiful.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And what a privilege to have a creative filmmaker, educator, real estate investor, entrepreneur, best-selling author, but most of all, friend here in the studio. Thank you for coming.
Appreciate you, bro.
Awesome. And if you also find value in these conversations, in these interviews, you can find it on the YouTube channel, on social media, share it with other people, and let's continue creating this community of creators that are beyond the scenes. I'll see you in the next episode.